Now, at the start of the year, we did a programme on financial mistakes, and we asked you to get in touch to share your biggest financial bloomer. A number of people told us theirs was buying a flat, only to find it was in a block with cladding like that used on Grenfell Tower. That left their property unsellable, and they had to pay for the cladding to be replaced. Some feared bankruptcy. Here's a couple of them.
Now I'm stuck with a £45,000 bill to fix the flammable cladding on a building I didn't build and I don't own. I can't move on with my life and I'm facing bankruptcy.
Investing my life savings into a flat which, because of cladding issues, it transpires, is now worthless.
Well, that's just two of the tweets we got, read there by colleagues. With me is Ritu Saha, who also contacted us then. Ritu, you have a flat in Bromley in South East London. How has this issue affected you?
So it's affected me extremely badly. I spent 8 years saving to buy my first home, and 2 years later I found out that this home, which has a pretty big mortgage on it, was worth zero, and I was then landed with bills of about 25% of the actual value of the flat to fix this dangerous cladding.
So that's your share of it for the whole block?
That's correct.
What else have you had to pay out meanwhile?
So we've also, since we found out that our block is covered with Grenfell-style cladding, we've had a 24/7 waking watch patrol on the block. And in the last 2 years, our block of 57 flats has spent £500,000 just to pay for the waking watch.
But the government says, and I must say until these tweets I thought it was true, that it has a fund of £200 million to pay for all this. Doesn't that solve the problem?
That absolutely does not solve the problem. First of all of these buildings, to make them safe in the interim, have got these waking watch patrols, and the fund does not cover this. So we leaseholders who don't even own our flats are having to pay for this.
So between when you found out and when it's eventually done, you have to pay for someone to walk around the building 24/7, or various people, and wake you up if anything does catch fire.
That is correct. And I have had to pay £5,000 every year for the last 2 years just to pay for these people to walk around. And that is the same situation with everybody else in my block.
And also here with us is William Martin. William, you have a flat in Sheffield. Now, have you applied to this fund to try and get some money at least to help you?
Yeah, our building have applied, but we in the building have got massive concerns about the fund itself because whilst it's great that we may have access to this money, but the government haven't been clear about what happens if the cost of remediation costs £3 million, but the government actually only give us £2 million. So
you're expecting £2 million from it, are you?
We've been quoted that it's going to cost around that much for the remediation works. But again, there's nothing in the fund that clarifies what would happen if the cladding comes off and there's other fire safety issues related to the cladding. There's no clarity being given on the ins and outs of the fund.
So I suppose there might be different building regulations now about fire breaks between floors and things.
Exactly, things like fire breaks.
And what about applying for it? Is that a straightforward process?
Applying for it has been one of the most stressful processes. It's almost like they don't want you to apply for it. There are so many hoops that you have to jump through in order to get access to this fund. And even before,
like what?
So we had to go through the issue of getting state aid forms signed by everyone in the building, which is a huge task when you have 113 leaseholders. You have to get pre-checks on the cladding, which it costs an enormous amount. And if you don't have that money in your sort of sinking fund in the building, you can't even get to the fund application itself.
Now, Ritu, you took this so seriously that you formed the UK Cladding Action Group. What's the scale of the problem?
Well, the scale of the problem is huge. One news article said that there are probably about 200,000 people which are affected by flats with dangerous cladding. In terms of just the Grenfell-style cladding, the latest numbers that have come out show that about 21,000 households are affected and living in flats with dangerous cladding. So the scale of the problem is huge compared with the amount of money that the government has put aside, which is simply not going to cover it.
Now, you both say that you as residents are going to have to pay this, but the government has told us that it says resident safety is our utmost priority. Of course, it would say that. Building owners, though, it says, who are responsible for ensuring buildings are safe, should look at all the options so the costs are not passed on to leaseholders. But they are being passed on to you, not the people who ultimately own the building.
They are being passed on to us, and this idea that these owners are suddenly going to cough up this money and sort this problem out is just ludicrous. We have evidence of that from all of the last sort of 18 months as I was battling with ACM-clad buildings. So with these new HPL buildings, there's no way these owners are going to cough up.
This is two different sorts of cladding that have to be replaced. And Ritu, have you found any willingness among the members of your group and the owners of the buildings they live in to pay for it by the owners?
Well, in our building itself, our building owner is absolutely refusing to pay for it, and they have said that these threats of the government are hollow threats because there is no legal remedy to actually make building owners pay for it. Under the law, it is the leaseholders who don't even own the flats that have to pay, and all the people who are contacting us are saying that our building owners are not paying. We are being landed with massive bills.
Now, the government also says it's going to pass a new law, and it says it will strengthen enforcement powers to hold building owners and managers to account. Do you think that will work?
That will absolutely not work. The government is very well aware that under the laws of the land, building owners are not responsible for paying for the removal of this cladding, which is why we are in the situation where so many blocks have still not been remediated more than 2.5 years after the tragedy at Grenfell. So these laws are simply only going to serve to pass the money back onto the leaseholders.
Now, we heard earlier from one of the people who tweeted us saying that they thought they were going bankrupt. You've all said your flat is now worthless. It is obviously a great financial crisis. How are people going to meet these bills?
Well, people are simply going to go bankrupt if this continues. As I said, for me personally, it is going to cost £75,000 just for me to fix the cladding on my block, and that is the same for all the other 56 people who live in the block.
And I think that's a point, isn't it? Even if there's one person in the building that can afford that, it requires the entire building to be able to do that, and that's just not possible.
So it's everybody has to do exactly the same thing, or you just can't do it.
Yes.
And it seems like we're forgetting about the fact that, yes, it's important about who pays, but let's not forget these buildings are so dangerous. And we need to move on from this issue about who pays, sort these buildings out, make them safe.
One very short, if you would, Ritu, piece of advice for people listening who are in your position.
Get in touch with us with the UK Cladding Action Group. Get in touch with your neighbours, get organised, get onto social media, contact your MPs and make sure that your voices are heard loud and clear by the government.
Don't ignore it. It's not going to go away. Thank you very much, Ritu Saha and William Martin.